Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are going to challenge a genuinely massive historical myth. Whenever you think of the Silk Road, you probably immediately picture Marco Polo, right? Or, European explorers bravely venturing east to connect the globe. But that narrative completely misses the actual architects of a 700-year global trade network. We're going to see how this incredible, sprawling system of commerce was built, not by armies or conquerors, but by merchants.
So, I really want you to rethink everything you thought you knew about the Silk Road. If we strip away that traditional European discovery narrative, we find this absolutely fascinating historical reality. Starting around the year 750 CE, it was actually Muslim merchants, scholars, and empires who untangled these scattered, ancient trails and literally united the globe. I mean, they didn't just participate in the Silk Road, they entirely rebuilt the whole shebang. But why did it even need rebuilding in the first place?
Well, to understand that, we have to rewind a bit to the 5th century. The original trade routes, the ones anchored by the Han Dynasty in China and the Roman Empire in the West, they were basically shattered. When Rome collapsed, the western half of the Silk Road essentially died with it. What was left was this super fragile system just completely plagued by a patchwork of risky middlemen. There was no shared language, no common currency, and absolutely zero trust. Moving goods was not only dangerous, it was just terribly inefficient.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the 7th century Islamic Caliphate stepped up and provided the ultimate solution. In just over 100 years, they managed to unite a territory stretching all the way from Spain to the borders of China. But the real revolution here? It was commercial. They set up these 3 powerful pillars of global trade across this massive territory: a common currency, a shared commercial law, and Arabic as the international lingua franca, basically the shared language of business.
So let's look a little closer at that first pillar. The Islamic Caliphate introduced 2 coins, the gold dinar and the silver dirham. And because these coins had strictly standardized weights, they created an absolutely unprecedented level of global financial trust. You didn't even need to know the person you were trading with, you just needed to trust the coin in your hand. In fact, archaeologists have actually dug up these exact coins everywhere from Scandinavia all the way down to Thailand. How crazy is that?
But they didn't stop at just standardizing physical money. They actually invented some brilliant financial technology. Take something called Hawala. This was essentially the medieval Internet of Finance. Using Hawala, a merchant in Baghdad could safely pay a business partner thousands of miles away in India without carrying a single physical coin across the desert. It functioned entirely on this interconnected chain of shared faith and trust between brokers.
Now, what's really interesting here is how that trust was actually enforced. It wasn't just a casual handshake, It was backed by mudaraba, which were profit-sharing partnerships. These rules were derived from the Quran and Hadith, and they served as a robust international legal framework. It practically guaranteed fair dealing and standardized contracts across thousands of miles. So whether you were doing business in Morocco or Malaysia, the rules of the game were exactly the same.
Part 1. The Ocean Highway and Mastering the Monsoon.
Now, while camel caravans crossing vast deserts definitely make for great stories, the actual real volume of global trade, that happened on the water, where Muslim sailors just completely dominated. Their secret weapon? Mastering the monsoon winds. They figured out that the winds reliably blew eastbound from June to September and then flipped westbound from December to March. By doing this, Muslim merchants turned the treacherous Indian Ocean into a highly predictable, high-speed maritime highway. They operated on this strict natural schedule that allowed for just massive commercial expansion.
When you piece all this together, you get a truly global economy. Muslim merchants were essentially acting as the ultimate middlemen. Picture this. They're loading up ships in Kilwa, Tanzania, with East African gold, ivory, and enslaved peoples, then trading those for Indian spices and cotton, and sailing all the way to Ganzhou to pick up Chinese silk and porcelain. They were the key connectors, operating literally the biggest supply chain the medieval world had ever seen. But arguably the most profound export moving along this network wasn't a physical good at all. It was Islam itself. As these traders settled down in various port cities, married locals, and just conducted honest daily business, they ended up spreading their faith peacefully. And this is exactly why Indonesia, a place that was never actually invaded by a Muslim army, is today the world's largest Muslim majority country, home to over 230 million Muslims.
Part 2. The Golden Age and the House of Wisdom.
Under the Abbasid Caliphate, Baghdad practically transformed into the world's first true international research university. Because think about it, when you connect the world through trade, you aren't just moving spices and silk, you're moving ideas. And this perfectly illustrates the massive intellectual convergence that happened back then. Greek philosophy, the Indian concept of zero, and crucially, Chinese papermaking all collided right there in Baghdad. Papermaking alone was a total game changer. It made books so affordable that in Cairo you could buy a bound book for the price of a single meal. Suddenly, knowledge wasn't just restricted to the ultra-rich anymore.
Just take a look at the direct products of this civilization, which was completely built on the free exchange of ideas. We've got Al-Khwarizmi, who gave us algebra. Ibn Sina wrote the Canon of Medicine, a text that European universities literally relied on for half a millennium. And Al-Idrisi? He drew the most accurate map of the medieval world. None of these monumental intellectual achievements happen without these vast trade routes bringing all these brilliant minds and resources together.
Part 3. The Ultimate Traveler. Ibn Battuta's Journey.
To truly grasp how deeply connected this vast network really was, we have to talk about a 21-year-old Moroccan legal scholar named Ibn Battuta. He left his home in 1325 for a pilgrimage. Now, we all know the name Marco Polo, right? But their journeys are a pretty stark contrast. Ibn Battuta traveled for 24 years through what would today be 44 different modern countries. Marco Polo's journey was incredible, for sure, but it was just a fraction of the distance and duration of Ibn Battuta's epic expedition.
75,000 miles. I mean, let that sheer distance just sink in for a second. He traversed the Sahara, the Indian Ocean, the Asian steppes, and the most crucial point here is this. He traveled that staggering distance relying almost entirely on the Islamic network of hospitality. No passport, no visa required. Because he was part of this unified network of trust and shared law, he was welcomed as an honored guest essentially everywhere he went.
Part 4, Decline and Lasting Legacy, the Disruption of 1498.
So if this network was so massive, so dominant, and so advanced, how in the world did it eventually lose its grip on the globe? Well, we can trace the macro events on this timeline, from the early expansion right up through Ibn Battuta's travels. But the sudden, massive shock to the system, that happens right here in 1498. That was the year the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama sailed around the southern tip of Africa and arrived in India, completely bypassing the traditional land networks. And well, he didn't exactly bring trade agreements, he brought cannons.
Over the next 300 years, European colonial powers basically violently dismantled this entire trust-based network. They systematically seized the most crucial ports, places like Hormuz, Goa, and Malacca. They attacked established merchant ships, imposed heavy taxes by military force, and pretty much replaced a centuries-old system of mutual trade with a model based heavily on extraction and exploitation.
Yet, despite that huge, violent disruption, the legacy of this Muslim Silk Road is actually still very much with us today. Have you noticed that the borders of the modern Muslim world almost perfectly mirror those old trade routes? Plus, that Hawala money transfer system we talked about earlier, it is literally still used today across the globe. The legal and financial principles established back then, they now form the foundation of a multi-trillion-dollar Islamic banking industry. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought. For 700 years, a unified system of trust, shared values, and commerce connected humanity in ways no conquering army ever really could. It fundamentally shaped the modern world we live in today. So, I'll leave you with this. Can ethical business and commerce actually change the world more powerfully than any army? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning what you think you know.